Meeting and surpassing all audience expectations every day. It's Rush Limbaugh, the EIB network. It is clear to me, folks, the media is continuing in a seminal effort to divide the country. Remember, the media now is the organizing power and force that propels the leftist agenda in this country. It's not the Democrat Party. They're serious players, but they are an arm of the actual organizing power and force, which is a universal, nationwide, mainstream, or drive-by media. The ploy being used, or the tactic being used, is identity politics, which is a creation of the left, and it's expressly meant to divide, and specifically along racial lines, with subdivision lines on gender and sexual orientation, bathroom preference, the various feminazi factions, we put them in there as well. I made a couple of points here earlier in the week in the second half, maybe the last hour of the program when I want to state them again here. And if you heard them the first time, I beg your indulgence. This is repetitive, but I'm doing this at a different time of the program, doing it in the first hour here. The ongoing effort that we see each and every day here is that there is a powerful force in this country that's comprised of Nazis and Klansmen and white supremacists. We have left-wing hate websites like the Southern Poverty Law Center. They're constantly pointing out these various so-called right-wing hate groups, and they're amplifying them, and they're making them appear to be massive. And the way they do this is to draw no distinctions. They imply, very close to state directly, but they imply that all of these wacko lunatics are, in fact, mainstream conservatives. And so the Klan and the Nazis, the neo-Nazis, and the white supremacists, the fact of the matter is, folks, do you know what the membership of the Ku Klux Klan is? And by the way, this group is said to be Donald Trump's base, and that is fundamental for you to understand. In all of this, the media, their allies like the Southern Poverty Law Center, they all want, their objective is to separate Trump's supporters from Trump. That's the effort now. If they can do that, then they think Trump will crumble. And so they're doing everything they can to drive a wedge between Trump's voters and Trump. And the way they're doing it is to cast Trump voters as Nazis, or as Klansmen, or as white supremacists. That's what they mean when they say this is Trump's base, and then that's why Trump will not attack them. He knows they are his base. And they want people to believe that it's this tiny faction of fringe characters that actually elected Donald Trump. That's what they're trying to create, that picture or that image. So how many members of the Klan are there? Anybody know? Because I do. Anybody know what the membership of the Ku Klux Klan is? I'll tell you. It's around 200,000. You'll see different numbers, different places, but it's 200,000, and that's at the top. That may be so overblown. I think that is way, way, way more than the actual number. But we'll use it. How many neo-Nazis in the United States are there? According to the media, they want you to believe they're everywhere. That the neo-Nazis and the Klan is everywhere, and they're protesting, and there's so many of them they elected Trump. And then, of course, we have the white supremacists. 3 different groups done and characterized to make it look like it's a massive number. Folks, there aren't enough of these people to elect a dog catcher. The numbers that we are talking about are so infinitesimally small. The numbers here are probably less than the total gay population of this country, and probably around the same percentage as the transgender population. This group of people couldn't elect anybody to the Congress. They couldn't elect anybody to the Senate. There aren't enough of them. And yet they are being portrayed. You are being asked to believe, or you're having it just swarmed all over you, that this is Trump's base. It's a smear job. It is an effort at libeling, slandering the people that did vote for Donald Trump. And it's on this basis that if they're able to nullify the election, if this silent coup that they're engaged in, if they really can get Trump out of office by eventually saying he's unfit, this guy is just beyond this will be a fundamental part of it. Well, look who elected him, for crying out loud. Nazis and white supremacists in the Klan. We can't have somebody like that be That's why they're setting this up. The reason why they're trying to portray this infinitesimal, this tiny number of people as Trump's base is because that will be one of the foundations that will be used to force Trump out of office. Don't doubt me when the truth of the matter is their number in total is an asterisk in compared to the entire population of this country. This is one of the greatest smear jobs and mischaracterizations that we have seen the media attempt to pull off. Because the truth of the matter is the mainstream left is far greater in number than this bunch of people. The Occupy Wall Streets and now they're calling the Antifa, the anarchists, the Black Lives Matter, whatever. These people vary in size depending on how many are hired at each riot. But you can find ads on Reddit, you can find ads on Craigslist when the left is trying to hire rioters and protesters at various events. And they were hiring for Charlottesville in advance. The ad has been found on, I think it's Craigslist. Anyway, the violence in this country in the form of protests and riots, 99% of it is perpetrated, started, maintained by left-wing groups. Black Lives Matter, Occupy Wall Street, now Antifa, however you pronounce it, and of course the anarchists. They differ in name depending on the time of year and depending on what the protest is or what the purpose of the riot is. But it's the same people bought and paid for and arranged and put on call waiting for the go signal when it's time to organize and move into action. The point is there are lots of them. And the Democrat Party campaigns to them. The Democrat Party is doing everything it can to be a home to Black Lives Matter. Democrat Party is who needs to answer questions. The Republican Party is not making a home for the Nazis. The Republican Party is not welcoming in the Klan. But the Democrat Party is welcoming in these agents of violence. And in fact, not just welcoming them in, they are promoting them and they are using them. Occupy Wall Street, Black Lives Matter, these groups are conferred great moral status by the Democrat Party. They are the groups of violence. They are the groups that riot. They are the ones who show up without permits. They are the ones destroying private property, such as in Ferguson, such as in Baltimore. And the Democrat Party loves them, and the Democrat Party welcomes them, and the Democrat Party raises money from them and for them, and the Democrat Party campaigns for their votes and their money. And yet, the news is that Nazis and their swastikas and the Klan and white supremacists make up the Donald Trump voter base. It's unconscionable, it's inaccurate, and it is untrue. There are so few of those people, they couldn't elect anything. One other point I want to make here about the umbrella notion of identity politics. Identity politics, very simple. it seeks to convince as many people as possible that they are victims of this country. And specifically, they are victims of the people who have founded and theoretically run this country from the beginning. Every minority group, even ones that are made up by the Democrat Party, are said to be victims. Because once they are proclaimed victims, and once the victims accept the victim status, then they automatically have, as far as the media and the left is concerned, legitimate grievances. And when their grievances are legitimate, then they are empowered to take any action necessary to redress the grievance, even if it is lawless. They are morally permitted to break any law because what they are fighting is so outrageous. Well, let's take this to its obvious conclusion. How many minority groups are there in America? Add them up. Let's just go with the obvious ones. We have feminists, women, said to be a minority. African Americans, minority. Let's divide them. African American women, African American men, two more minorities. Then we have Hispanics, and we have gays and lesbians and transgenders. And it just keeps going. There are victim groups upon victim groups, and they're all victimized by who? Who's doing this victimization? Who's discriminating against them? Who is mistreating them? One group of people. White people, but which white people? Who are the actual perpetrators of this victimization? Well, all liberal Democrat whites are exempted because they can't possibly be guilty of this. In fact, you could make the case that white liberal men and women will find their place in some category of victim on the left. So take away a significant portion of the white population, they can't possibly be perpetrators of victimization because they themselves are liberal Democrats and are thus, in their own way, victims, or they are sympathetic with the victims. My point is, imagine you are a 30-year-old, 25-year-old white guy. You find yourself alienated. You watch the news every day and you hear that you're the reason there's all this strife. You're the reason there's problems. You're the reason you're raping women, so you don't go to college because that's what's going to happen. You'll be accused of it. You don't go to college because you don't, there's nothing for you there, given what's happened to curriculum and given the change in power structure. So what do? You resort to playing video games, you stay in a basement, you do whatever. We're talking about white guys who are essentially powerless, who are now being blamed for doing all of this victimization. It's the most amazing. The math just doesn't add up. But imagine if you are one of these out of work, unemployed, or underemployed white guys, and you don't have a college education because whatever reason, you haven't gone, you don't want to go, and you've been watching television, turn on the news, you can't escape it for the last, every year of your adult life, you can't escape that you're to blame. You're the reason that there's all this unhappiness and strife and discrimination and racism and bigotry. You're the reason. And you're sitting there. You don't have the power to do anything to anybody, and yet you're being blamed for it. What would you do? Somebody has to be doing all this victimizing with all the groups on the left that are victims, and they are legion. And the Democrats and the media have sought to make as many people victims as possible. And the victims themselves willingly accept the status because then it's not their fault for what happens. It's always somebody else who is doing all the victimization. It's a bunch of people that don't have the power anyway. But put yourself in their shoes. Imagine you watch the news from Charlotte just the last 5 days. Imagine as you watch, you realize you're being blamed for all this. What would your reaction be?